I'm Patt Morrison. As you heard me talking about with Governor Ridge, the Patriot Act, certain provisions of it are up for renewal in Congress. The Patriot Act, a very controversial act at the time it was passed, even though there was a great support for it. Provisions of it have come under criticism for being intrusive on civil liberties. On the other side, people have said that the Patriot Act has kept us safe. These provisions that are coming up for renewal are the subject of our discussion with two members of Congress, Congressman Jerrold Nadler from the New York 8th District and a Democrat. Congressman, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
And Congressman Mike Coffman, a Republican from Colorado's 6th District and a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Nadler, you were a critic of some elements of the Patriot Act. Where do you stand now on renewing, in particular, three provisions?
Give one piece of background first. Remember, the Patriot Act was marked up, that is, discussed and debated and amendments voted on for 5 days, I think it was, in the Judiciary Committee back in 2001, and was unanimously passed by the Judiciary Committee, 36-0. Then the Republican leadership threw out the bill, rewrote an entirely new bill of several hundred pages, literally overnight. We voted on a very different bill the next day, and this is the bill we're living with. I think that the Patriot Act, in many ways, is that, there were good provisions in it, but some of the provisions were drawn too broadly. And now that we're looking at them, we ought to revise them, not repeal them, but revise them. So, for example, the roving wiretap provision, which is justified because in the sense that you don't want to have to get a separate warrant for every telephone or every different cell phone that someone is going to use. If you want to wiretap John Doe, in the old days, you just wiretap his house or the bar you knew he was going to frequent. But now we can throw away a different cell phone every half hour. That's impractical. So you have to have this authority for a wiretap for wherever John Doe is whatever phone he's going to use, and that's fine, except that when you combine it with an unspecific definition of who you're looking at, it permits the government legally to tap almost any phone of almost anybody without having to show that that person is in any way connected to terrorism or espionage or even suspected of any criminal wrongdoing. This violates the Fourth Amendment rights of ordinary Americans, and we've got to tighten up the ID requirement there so that it fulfills its purpose but doesn't violate all the constitutional rights of almost anybody. Similarly,
let's hear for a moment from Congressman Coffman about his response to this. And Congressman Coffman, these three provisions, which a lot of members, a lot of your colleagues have said, look, we need to protect civil liberties and tighten these up a little.
Well, I think we always need to review it in terms of making sure that the appropriate balance is there between the right to privacy and individual freedom and the right to protect the American people. And so I'm more than happy to continually review these provisions. But I think, being from Colorado, we just had a situation where a terrorist was arrested there, and obviously an alleged terrorist, an alleged terror plot. We've got a trial to go through involved between Colorado and New York, and so some of the very provisions in question that are in this legislation, in the reauthorization, were used in this particular investigation. I think they're important to preserve to protect the American people.
And do you think that investigation, Congressman Coffman, might have proceeded as it did if the caveats that Congressman Nadler once put in place were there?
Well, I think we certainly both agree on the roving wiretaps, and that was an issue that was used in this investigation, and I'm glad to hear the Congressman want to preserve that.
But modify it so as to rein it in a little.
Well, and I'm certainly happy to look at modifying it, but I think at the end of the day, we have to make sure that the American people are protected, and we have to balance that again with the right to privacy and the protection of freedoms. And that is difficult. That's not an easy balance.
Congressman Coffman, let's hear from Congressman Nadler.
We all agree.
Congressman Nadler, go ahead.
To protect the American people. We all agree, at least we say we do, that we also have to protect civil liberties. And frankly, rhetoric about there are terrible people out there and we have to protect, we all agree on that. The question is, how do you draw the statute, the law, so that you give law enforcement or anti-terrorist enforcement the powers they need without going overboard to give them powers to spy on people who have no connection. For example, now here's the next section, Section 215, which is the second one that is expiring. This is the business records. It gives the ability. It gives us the ability to get to not subpoena, but to order someone who has your business records, your librarian, your ISP server from the internet, your travel agent. It gives the FBI, whoever, the ability to go to them and say, "Give me all the records about Joe Blow." Fine.
Congressman, I'm going to have to ask you to hold that thought for a moment. We'll be away momentarily and come right back with Congressman Jerrold Nadler and Congressman Mike Coffman about renewal of elements of the Patriot Act. I'm Patt Morrison. 3 provisions of the Patriot Act are scheduled to expire. These Patriot Act provisions are about wiretaps, about surveillance, and about getting hold of the business and financial records, computed data, even library records of a suspected terrorist with a judge's approval without notifying the person in question. My guests, 2 members of Congress, are talking about this. In a moment, we're going to hear from a former FBI agent who is now an ACLU lawyer on his take on this. Congressman Nadler, you've been conducting hearings on this. What are you hearing from the intelligence community about whether or not these provisions should be altered at all?
Well, the official intelligence community never wants anything, never wants any powers taken or discretion taken away from them. But then we have former CIA agents and former FBI agents, such as who've testified that the powers are too broad and broader than necessary. As I was starting to say about the second of the provisions, Section 215, which says that the government can get an order to examine all your business records, all your medical records, all your travel records, all your libraries, anything. Now, the problem is that the way it's drafted now, this can be used against any person, even if the person is not suspected of wrongdoing or of any connection to a foreign power or a terrorist organization. So we want to put in language that says that you have to present to the court to get this order specific and articulable facts that would give you a reason to believe that the information you're seeking pertains to a terrorist or to an agent of a foreign power. So to rein it in a little, so at least you have to say why you think that you have some reason to believe that the information you're seeking pertains to a bad guy. And the same goes, by the way, for national security letters, which is not expiring, but which is very akin to these business records. And there, you don't even have to go to a judge. The FBI simply issues an order to the library, whoever. And they are, by the way, barred from ever telling you that they had to give the government all the records of what you've read or your travel or your banking records. So with that kind of power, we have to make sure it's limited to where there really is a suspicion that maybe this guy has something to do with terrorism.
All right, Congressman Coffman, we've heard about what Congressman Nadler has been hearing in his hearings. Is given that for the most part the FISA court has been very cooperative and other judges have been cooperative with these, why not build in some more safeguards?
I'm more than happy to look at safeguards, and I look forward to see the Democrat proposal that protects America and strikes that balance. I'm worried that it will not protect America, and these provisions have protected America. And where we have concrete examples, obviously the situation recently in Colorado where a terrorist plot was thwarted, and do we have, in fact, concrete examples of abuses, and I think that they need to be brought forward first, and then let's examine possibly the need to reform some of these. But I'm very reluctant to throw them out, given the success in terms of protecting the American people.
Well, Congressman Coffman, hang on one second, Congressman Nadler. Congressman Coffman, we just heard Governor Tom Ridge, the first head of Homeland Security, saying that protecting civil liberties is protecting America.
Well, I think you have to strike the appropriate balance, and protecting freedom is protecting America. But, look at, again, the provision, at least we agree on, the roving wiretap, which is one of these proposals that the liberals are saying is controversial. And yet, I think that my Democrat colleague on the phone in this interview is agreed with me that that's an important provision to keep, and yet that's considered one of the controversial provisions. We can certainly work on the issue about the ability to subpoena records and where that ought to go. But again, I'm concerned we have had a record of success in this country since 9/11, and so that we don't throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater.
All right. Congressman Nadler, you just heard Congressman Coffin say essentially don't mess with success. And the White House has said, please extend these 3 provisions.
Well, no one is talking about abolishing them. And as I said, the question is, there are 2 things I want to say. Number one, we're talking about modifying these provisions to better protect civil liberties while giving the government the power it legitimately needs. And the question is, would you agree with this specific provision? And I gave a couple of the specifics that we're talking about. And when Congressman Kaufman says that the provisions are controversial, they're not controversial in the sense that anybody is saying they should be abolished altogether. They're controversial in the sense that people are saying they're not tight enough. They're not drawn properly. They can be abused. Have there been instances of abuse? Yes. Hundreds of them reported by the IG, of national security letters, of business records, of various other things. But I would say one other thing. It's easy to say, when you talk about we've stopped various terrorist plots. Thank God we have. But the question then is, did we use these provisions? Did we need these provisions to stop those plots? And if we needed these provisions, did we need the overbroad parts of those provisions that we seek to modify? In other words, what we're looking to do is have stringent enough provisions so that the government has the power it needs, but not so loose that it can abuse civil liberties unnecessarily.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both. Congressman Jerrold Nadler from New York, a Democrat who is chairing the House Subcommittee on the Constitution, listening to hearings about extending provisions of the Patriot Act that are set to expire, and Congressman Mike Kaufman, a Republican from Colorado and a member of the House Armed Services Committee. My thanks to the honorable gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.